Hello. For today's video, I'm going to show you the basic concepts of panning and using the levels or faders to control the level of a sound in a mix. First off, let me go ahead and bring a simple mix up. Here you can see I have just a song that has drums. We have kick, snare, toms, hi-hat, overhead left, overhead right. We have bass, some keyboard sounds, guitar, lead vocal, some harmonies, and an ad-lib vocal. Your basic song with just a few instruments. Now, first thing I probably would do is start with the drums. I'm going to show you guys, just in case you don't know what a drum set looks like. Here you can see a basic drum set. This is pretty simple. You have a snare drum, you have your toms, you have your kick drum or bass drum, you've got your cymbals, crash, ride, and your hi-hats. Now you can see they're kind of positioned around the drummer so he can play this, but this also gives us the general concept of how we want to pan stuff to be in a drum kit. Now luckily we're not dealing with a large drum kit like this where you have a lot more instruments and have to deal with a lot more tracks. So this one's a little bit more simplified for you. Now what I recommend is usually, since this is a live recording, we have, let me bring this guy back up. We normally have what we call the overhead mics. They would be placed one here and one here, picking up the stereo image of those drums. So if we grab the overhead left, bring it up a bit, grab the overhead right, also bring it up a bit, hit play, you'll hear the general concept of what the drums are going to sound like, but you don't hear any panning. We're going to be adding that. Now, as far as the concept of panning and volumes, I drew this up so that way I could help explain a little bit about what's happening. When you pan stuff, you're taking your sound and panning it either to the left or panning it to the right. You just normally have some sort of pan pot that you're turning, and that'll position the sound in your, think of this as your stereo field. But you also have your fader, which brings it up and down in volume. And just like in real life, if someone walked away from you farther away, their voice level would go down. So you could think of this as you're moving that sound file. When you turn it down, you're moving it farther away in the mix. When you bring it up and level, you're bringing it closer to you in the mix. So between the fader and the pan, you have the capability of moving your sound file both left and right and farther and closer. So that's giving you that almost 3D style mixing capability just with the left and right and the volume. So let's try that out. I'm going to go ahead and pan these guys. I'll take the left, pan it completely to the left. Take the right and pan it completely to the right. Now let's listen again to that. You should be able to hear that now. You could actually hear that there's different positions for each drum. You can hear the hi-hat a little bit more to the left. The side stick is kind of center, which should start hitting the snare real soon. We can hear the kick drum dead center. There you heard the toms, they went across. So now I got an idea of what the drums are supposed to be in. In other words, how they were recorded. I'm going to go ahead and just mute these guys for right now. I'm going to start fresh now that I understand in my head where I need to position the different things. Let's start with the kick. Start bringing up the kick. Give it a little bit of level. Add some snare. Now the snare isn't really hitting just yet. Right now it's just a side stick, which is the side or the rim of the snare. The drummer will hit that to get a slightly different sound. But that was a snare hit there. Here we go. Okay, that's a decent blend. Now let's start bringing up, I know the toms don't play just yet, so I'm just going to bring them up a bit and we'll wait till they hit. But if you recall, the toms were kind of going from left to right. So I know this is the highest pitch tom. I'll bring that one left. Take my middle tom, pan it just slightly over. And then my lowest tom more to the right. And there you just heard a tom going across. Let me go ahead and bring that back. See how it give that motion going from left to right? Let's bring this back. I'm going to add the hi-hats. All right, that's sounding pretty good. Now let's bring the overheads in. I think that's a pretty decent sound, but I'm noticing that I went over. In other words, this lit up red. My output is clipping. That's not a good thing. Now, I do like how these drums are all set up level-wise, and also the panning. The hi-hat, I'd like to pan it a little bit more, but let's go ahead and fix those levels. Now, I could either go to each one and bring them down slightly, but a quicker and even better way, because we can keep them all together as far as how they relate to each other, is you click on one, hold down your shift, click on your last one. Now I've selected multiple tracks. I can grab one single fader now, and because they are all selected, they will all come down together. I'll bring down a couple dB. Click on one single track again to deselect that and hit rewind. Let's try this again. See, we have the same blend. I'm gonna bring the hi-hat a little bit more to one side. Here comes the change up. Notice now I'm not clipping whatsoever, yet I still have the same blend on all those drums. Alright, let's go ahead and stop that. If I go back to the picture of the drum kit, now versus listening to it in mono where everything was panned to dead center, in other words right in the center, you're starting to hear where this drum kit becomes more lively. We can actually hear the difference between the different sounds and their positions. Now this will become even more apparent if you start adding EQ and also compression and gating. But for now, we're just going to mess with faders and pans. Let's add some other instruments. Let's go and start with a bass. Bass usually stays right in the center, just like the kick. Keyboards. Guitar. I would like a little more separation between that keyboard sound and that guitar. Right now they're both in the center and they're kind of fighting each other. So I'm going to try panning them out. Much better. Let's start adding some vocals. Let's give them some harmonies.
Every day, oh yeah, gotta give. Stay flying away, oh yeah.
Now, notice that the harmonies, I just brought them up and they are just as loud as the lead singer. That's going back to, remember how I showed you as far as being able to use the volume to place things closer and farther? If you think about it, when you see on stage, your lead singer is always going to be up front and you're going to hear his vocals the most. Harmonies aren't there with him, sitting right in the center. We usually have harmonies sitting farther back behind him. In other words, they're backup singers. They sing things that add to that lead vocal. So I wouldn't want to have them the same center spot and also same level. So let's try listening to that. And let me pan and use the faders to place those harmony vocals a little bit better. Let's bring them down. And let's pan them out.
Feel the power in my soul. This power worth much more than gold. I let that take control. Let the love unfold. Let the love unfold. Yeah, give thanks and praises, people. Yes, I do. Every day, every day.
Notice that they're slightly behind that lead singer and they're panned out, giving you a good separation. Now let's bring in ad-libs. I'm going to pan the ad-libs a little bit as well. Let's bring the song back.
There's no place I'd rather be in the midst of His majesty. Feel the power in my soul. This power worth much more than gold. I let that take.
You should be able to hear there that where you could hear the lead vocalist standing out more. He's been positioned. Let me bring this picture back up. Up front, you have his instrumentation around him. Singer is heard. The kick, the snare cuts right through. You have the background singers over behind him, and even the ad-lib singer behind him. This gives you a lot more space within your 3D image. If everything was placed dead center, we'd get quite a different sound. You can see how using your fader for positioning it closer or farther, and your panning from left to right to give you a much better sound in the mix. This is going to be even more emphasized, again, like I said, once you use EQing, compression, and even some time-based effects, which I'll show you in different lessons. So hopefully you got to see how this works out and how just the simple panning and fader setups can give you a much better sound versus everything just brought up at same level and same panning position.